What's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games, and today we're going to talk about special things in Magic. So one of the comments that piqued my interest on this topic recently is somebody mentioned that they had a different definition for this phrase I often will say, which is when everything is special, nothing is. So I want to make sure that everybody, well, I say this all the time, and I'm sure other creators say this same thing. It's used around in the community a lot. I want to make sure that at least I share with you what my understanding and interpretation of this phrase is, so that, again, we're speaking from the same common ground. What I mean by this is simply that if everything in the pack is special, there's many different types of XYZ special things, then there's really no special things anymore. Then it dilutes the whole idea of something being special, for me personally, at least. And that's all I really mean by this. So as an example, what are the things I find truly special, truly unique, truly interesting is, if you remember, like original box toppers, right? One per box, really unique looking things, full art frame that you've never seen before, right? These kind of things. And so far back then, you only saw this with lands. You didn't know it was possible with, creatures and planeswalkers, with other things. That's special. Zendikar expeditions, not the Zendikar Rising ones, because there were just, again, too many of them and they're everywhere, but Zendikar expeditions, where there was no box topper to get them. You had to open them in the pack, right? And you had to open more than one draft booster box usually to get them. I don't remember if it was like one per case, one per whatever. Those were special. And that applies, by the way, to the Kaladesh Inventions, Amonkhet Invocations, those kind of cards. They were great cards that were printed in a very special, unique frame for that set. Those things were very special, and they were interesting. I think what has happened in the years that has since then is that Wizard has made more and more of these special things just more commonplace, right? So for example, full art. So extended art, full art just became so common because they're in every collector boosters and they're just kind of like made for every card. Oh, now we're talking every set, every card's going to have 1, 2, 3 different frames, one of them being a borderless frame, right? Or, oh, if the card doesn't have a special frame, then it's going to have borderless. That's one of the issues I have with where we're currently going. All these cards, they don't need to be special. They don't need to have 4, 5, 6 different copies and versions and framing and whatever to make them seem interesting. The card itself should be interesting because it's unique. I mean, if you look at what's happened with Brothers War, one of the things I can really appreciate is the fact that because they had retro frame artifacts, they didn't have another showcase frame, which meant a lot of the cards were uniquely one-of-ones. The Meld cards, for example, they didn't design a second version of the Meld cards. So there's only one type of Mishra, there's only one type of Urza, again, the mythic one, rare one. I know there's different rarity of that card, but we're talking about the mythic rare Meld cards and Titania. I think that's why they're holding value too, because, well, guess what? There's only one of that card, and you either have that card or you don't have the card. There's not a special frame. You don't have to worry about alternate arts and whatever. And that's really something that's really uniquely beautiful and true. I really like those cards. I think the way that they put them together like that, for me, gives it more meaning than to have like a bunch of different versions. I think if we have showcase frames, for example, having one showcase frame every set, or let's say 5 cards you pick out of the entire set that are showcased, I think makes the showcase really interesting, right? For example, I really like the Kaldheim showcase frames with the whole like Celtic artwork and everything. But what really killed it for me was like half the cards in the set, apparently, or at least this is how I felt, had the Celtic, artwork. And that made it like less unique, less interesting, because all these cards had it. So I wasn't really looking forward to any particular one having this, special showcase frame. That's the problem, is that we were just being bombarded with too many special things. And then, of course, if everything's special, then it's like you have comparisons of like, oh, do you like the Art Deco showcase frame better? Or do you like the full art showcase frame better? Do you like the full art Deco or the borderless Art Deco? Like, what are we doing? This is, you're getting to the point where we can't even have conversations anymore. Full art lands, another good example, are really cool. When they first introduced them, it's like, hey, we're just test piloting these things. We don't know if it's going to work or not, but people loved it. And people loved it because it was unique and it was small. It was scarce, right? You couldn't get a ton of them. They were in unsets, and unsets were traditionally printed very like short printed. They didn't have too many boxes, one print run usually, because people didn't think, at Wizards anyways, didn't think that people want to long-term play with unsets. So they were unique. But then when Zendikar Rising happened and, we have 4, lands in the set, people were like, cool, that's good, right? But then as more and more sets in the future happened where there were more and more versions, conditions of the unsets, of 4 lands, it became kind of like meh. So only once in a while when the 4 lands really were different, really were impact, like the Neon Dynasty one, the UK like lands, the Japanese looking lands, that's the one that people really love because it looks so different from the other 4 lands. But then you get into like, but then even if it's really, really different, but there's like plenty of them. For example, you get into like Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, which by the way, I love those lands. Those lands, I think, in my opinion, the one especially where they're printed with that kind of like embossing around the border. If you haven't seen it, look at the first set, not the US printed, but the Japanese printed Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt lands. They have that embossing border around like the mana symbol and the border. It's a beautiful looking land, especially on that black and white. Look at the swamp, for example. Look at the islands. Look at the that blue on the island, that green on the forest. They're amazing, by the way. Those lands I think were really well done. But you have to get the Japanese ones. The American print where they lost the embossing are just terrible. They don't look good at all, in my opinion. Other things that really killed it, foil in every pack. Foil used to be really cool. Like you open a box, you got 1 foil every box. And it was like, it could be a common, you're like, I don't care. But like, man, what if it was the rare, right? It used to be, and if you remember old school days, especially the like 7th edition, 6th edition, etc. I guess they didn't have foils in 6th, 7th and on. The foils had the black border. So the whole, those, your core sets back then, they would have the white border for like, because it's a reprint or whatever. But the foil one would have a black border, and that made it unique, right? And the foiling back then was much better too. So it was like a cool looking foil, thicker cardstock. Oh, and it had a black border, killer, So things like that were interesting because they were different. And they were rare enough where it would actually be special whenever you pulled it. But nowadays we just have like, at first when I saw Secret Lair, I thought it was cool. It's interesting. If we release, 1 every quarter. So you release 4 Secret Lairs a year, wonderful, great product to have. It's unique, it's special. But then you have the problem of like, hey, Rick Grimes killing Godzillas, riding on a space marine and taking down a pony with rainbows. That's what we've gotten to now. So all these 4R borderless, this, that framing, whatever, it doesn't have that same feeling anymore, right? It's not special because there's just so many special things, right? How many versions of Sol Ring do we have now? Do we really need all of those versions of Sol Rings? And that's the problem. Now we have Transformers and sets. We have Mystical Archive. It just feels to me like Magic is trying to be a thing that it's not. It just feels to me that Magic is always trying to be someone else's game, somebody else's game, and trying to do all these little things in hopes that, you're casting a wide net in hopes that you're catching fish. And what you've missed is that by casting such a wide net, you've missed your target audience. You've missed the main people who really care about the game, who really want to play. And sure, you may be picking up 1Z, 2Z people out there who kind of cares about one set or one thing from Magic, but they're not here long-term to stay, because once you stop printing the thing that they like, then they don't care. Yeah. So that's what I mean by when everything's special, nothing is, right? And I feel like the only way to really prevent this from going down further is just to say, like, point out how ridiculous we've gotten. So here's some ideas, right? If you look at foils, I want to ask everybody who watches this video right now, take a pause, think before, I give you the answer. How many types of foil does Wizard have officially, like what they've announced and they've actually put titles under? How many do you think there are out there officially? I bet you the number will surprise you. From what I counted, it's 10. There could possibly be more. I just don't know about it, but I'll read them out to you, right? So you got the normal foil. Then you have etch foil. You have galaxy foil. You have neon foil. You have surge foil. So by the way, neon foil is from the Neon Dynasty stuff. Surge foil is from Commander 40K, Commander Collector's Edition. You have texture foil, type 1 and type 2, right? Then you have gilded foil, which is that gold kind of foiling that they did for Streets of New Capenna. You have shooting star foil, of course. This is your traditional, like what they call retro foil, right? Also known as retro foil. You have stamp foil, which is your pre-release kits with the stamp. And of course you have rainbow foil. And what they mean by rainbow foil, I think, is the Kaladesh masterpieces, invocations, and I think a lot of the From the Vault relics, where it has that kind of like a different glossiness across the whole entire card. It's not just foiling of the artwork or whatever. It's a little bit different. I think you just have to look at one to understand what I mean. But those are just 10 foils. By the way, the texture foils I count as 2. Maybe if you want to argue, there's actually 9. But texture foil type 1 and type 2, meaning type 1 is like it textures the art. Type 2 is the more common one from Dominaria United, where it textures the text boxes, but the art is kind of like just a normal, I guess, rainbow foil, if you will. I don't even know what to call them, right? So, and that's just the official ones that they've talked about. And there's a bunch of unofficial ones, because I would argue that some of the foiling is different, right? Whether you call it the same thing, they're not the same actual foil. So there could be way more than what I've mentioned. So, yeah, don't kill me in the comment section, right? Yeah, but seriously, this is too much. If just talking about foiling, we have that many different types of foils. And then if you take a look at a competitive game, I know a lot of people don't like Fab, and so if I talk about Flesh and Blood, it's like, oh, instant thumb down and leave the channel, whatever, right? Unsubscribe and all that stuff. But I'm going to talk about Flesh and Blood, because I think no matter whether we agree or disagree on whether it's a good game, the player base, all that stuff, I think one thing, or if the company is a greedy bastards, whatever, the one thing that I think we can agree on, and if you don't know about this, you should look into it, is Flesh and Blood did etch foiling really, really well. Really well. So when they first released the set, the Welcome to the Wraith, and their first edition has the etch foils, those foils, when you put them in your hand, they feel right. They don't bend. They have a really nice feel to them. Unlike the Magic etch foil, where the foiling, by etching a card, it almost makes it grainy, like it's less focused. You can't really see what's going on. The etch foils on Flesh and Blood cards are crisp. They look so clean. I mean, there's just like, it gives you the air of high quality. If you have never seen an etch foil from Flesh Blood, I highly recommend you go to a game store, look at one of these cards, and you'll appreciate when someone does something correctly, what it looks like. The second part that makes etch foiling so valuable and interesting and meaningful for Flesh and Blood is because it's actually rare. Like, for normal equipment, for example, that's etch foiled, it's 1 per box. So you open 1 Flesh and Blood box, you can expect to get 1 etch foil, okay? Sometimes you get 2, sometimes you get 0, but by and large, they've worked out that problem, and you get 1 per box. In addition to that, only the first edition, again, this is back in the old school days, Flesh and Blood 2.0 is not the same, but 1.0, only the first edition boxes had etch foils, which made them even more interesting, unique, and rare. So that's why they command the price they do. They are truly beautiful looking cards, and they hit the collector. I mean, it's like a 10 out of 10 on every single scale. I really like those cards. So that's what Flesh and Blood has decided to do. They did that, and they did rainbow foil, and that's it. They didn't do all this other special stuff because they didn't need to, right? Now, I know they've gone and done some full art, borderless stuff, whatever. But again, you see the difference is that they've kept those at a very high rarity, because then it makes it unique and makes it very special. The problem with Magic is, like, you open a set booster, you're looking at 2 or 3 showcase cards. Who would care about these things if they appear so frequently? I think I would argue that if Magic really wants to kind of peddle the showcase thing, just print them way less frequently. Like, for every 1,000 of any card you print 1 showcase card. you'll see the difference in the way that people treat those showcase cards from that point forth. And you don't have to go crazy, right? It doesn't have to be like, so just every 1,000. So the commons will still appear very common, the showcase ones. The uncommons, less and whatever. It goes up to rare, mythic, rare. You'll see that, and you don't have to even change anything. You can release the exact same amount of showcase cards, but now people are going to way more appreciate those showcase cards than they do now. Giving everyone access to one foil, one showcase, one whatever within every set booster, it's not a good thing. It's not positive. You've spent extra effort to design a new frame, new artwork and everything, and people hate it. Why do you think that is, right? Yeah. The other thing also is like all this different variations and whatever, it's just super confusing. Half the people don't even know what they're looking at anymore because there's just like variations of everything. There's a special showcase this, showcase that, different frame. Whenever, if you've seen me do some of this card sorting recently for set boosters, I'm making easily 20 plus piles. That's crazy, right? How do you sort through 20 plus piles of cards? It's a lot. So, it's not a good thing to have that many special frames of everything. It's too much. It's really, really too much. In some ways, like with all the different amounts of foiling, whatever, it makes me feel like the factories are just using Wizards as a test bed. Like, hey, we got this new foiling. Do you want to try it out? And Wizards, yeah, let's try it out. And so of course they do it one time and it fails and they're like, okay, whatever, forget about it. It's really dumb. It's super dumb that they do this, right? So as an example, gilded foils would actually be very, very, very cool if they did two things. One is made the entire set have nothing else. Gilded foil was the only special thing that would happen in Streets of New Capenna, and it was actually number 2, very rare, meaning you either have it only in collector's boosters, or if you put it into all the product lines, make it like 1 per 3 boxes. So like basically almost not guaranteed per box, right? Like half a case to a full case, you get 1 gilded foil. Now those cards will actually have a lot more collectability and meaning long term, right? They're just a little too easy to obtain, I think. Yeah. And here's the reality, and I think most players would agree with me on this one. All we really need is one type of foiling, one that doesn't curl, right? Now the the really, really OG foils kind of did this along with, I think, the masterpieces and the box toppers, the original box toppers, or actually Ultimate Master box toppers. They don't curl. They're pretty flat. I purchased some cards and I looked at the box toppers from Ultimate Masters and they're really, really flat. It was surprising to me. Yeah, make cards that don't curl, man. Like I think just last weekend somebody got disqualified because they had apparently like a foil that was curling, and so it was pretty obvious. And and this is why a lot of the pro players, they don't play with any foils, because you don't want to get disqualified because your deck is not up to standards with curling. So yes, please, one type of foil. Don't make all this special fancy foil. Just one type. Make it nice looking, clean. Make it not curl. That's all we need. We don't need 17, 10 different types of foils. And here's the thing, right? In conclusion, I want to say, like, keeping things simple actually makes the company more money. Here's why. Like, it makes the product line really easy to understand. It makes player not have to like go decide this version versus that version and do a bunch of comparison shopping. It's kind of overwhelming for a lot of players, to be honest. It makes the stores more willing to open packs and open boxes because it's less work to have to sort 17 different piles versus 3 or 4, right, for different rarities. And then it makes the collectors who are really going after these chase items feel like when they buy one of these things, it's really special. So by just keeping it simpler, and you're saving money too, right? Like you don't have to design so many things. You don't have to worry about like collation and, I got to put one of these cards at this rarity. All that stuff goes away. Do have special things. I'm not saying take all the special things out of Magic. I think they have value. But when you make everything special, then nothing is special. Does that make sense? Mark, Solar Games, I'm out. See ya.